The continent, otherwise known as the place that most of the Witcher games and books take place on, is one of the most lore-filled and fascinating fictitious worlds ever made. It's home to a host of horrifying creatures, both animal and human alike, along with hundreds of years of political intrigue and magical world-altering events. But maybe most interesting of all of these events is the catastrophe that kicked off the universe in the first place, the Conjunction of the Spheres. Taking place well over a millennia ago, the Conjunction marked a point in time where multiple universes and dimensions collided into one another, resulting in aliens and monsters from different places across multiple galaxies and planets meshing and contorting into one another. Which, by the way, is why we find all the monsters we do in the games, books, and shows The Witcher is based on. However, maybe the coolest thing this actually resulted in is the ability for some people, like Ciri, to travel between time and space itself to alternate dimensions and places by using unicorn god magic, and yes, I'm not joking. But despite how many amazing locations there are in The Witcher 3 specifically, full of so much mystery and intrigue, it's one of the planets we visit through a portal to another universe due to the conjunction of the spheres that takes the cake. And by far the coolest mission in the game, through time and space, an elf named Avallac'h manages to open up multiple portals that allow Geralt to follow him on a journey across many worlds. This includes a snow-covered apocalyptic planet that has been taken by the White Frost, which swallows entire planets whole in a deep freeze, a massive desert oasis with bugs the size of school buses, and underwater elven ruins that hold the keys to the secrets of ancient and powerful lost civilizations. But the one that really caught my attention, and also led to the most interesting questions, is the breathtaking and toxic Forgotten Gas world. Because while we were only here for potentially minutes, this location stands out for a couple of reasons. First of all, the environment here seems to expand for a dizzying amount of miles in each direction, with wide open plains and massive rock formations that tower above you, providing shade against the beaming rays of sun. And on the ground everywhere you look are tall and foreboding blades of red grass, being swallowed by a thick and poisonous green mist that if you stand in it for too long, will cut your journey short right near the end. Where things start to get especially strange though are the sounds we can hear. While the planet has an odd calmness and stillness to it, these momentary glimpses of peace are constantly broken up by the loud and ominous screeches and croaks bellowing from unseen monstrosities in the distance. If you stand in one place for too long, subtle hums and movement can be heard jostling in the ground beneath your feet, and throughout it all you can't help but shake the feeling that within this sea of red you are being watched, and that something is just off. Things only start to get even more crazy though when we look closer at the ground, because literally all around the landscape are what at first seemed like meaningless red blotches, but upon further inspection are revealed to be massive patches of algae. So what on earth is all of this algae doing on a planet this out in the open? And how did these rock formations even form naturally in the first place? It's almost like this planet is man-made or designed in some way. But the real answer might be even more interesting. If you comb through the environment some while on this planet, rather than quickly doing your quest and moving on, you may stumble upon gargantuan graveyards filled with strange skeletons and remains. These large and deceased creatures though are so notable not because of what they do have, but rather what they lack. No feet, no arms, and nothing that would indicate how these massive things even got around on this barren planet in the first place. But that's when it hits you. These creatures instead sport tails, fins, gills, and all manner of appendages suited for life deep underwater. So could it be that this grand and mysterious planet we have found ourselves on is actually previously a fully water-based planet? One that during the conjunction of the spheres was stripped of its most precious resource as universes and dimensions contorted themselves into one another, leaving in its wake a now barren and apocalyptic wasteland of pure mystery. In fact, in the base game of Witcher 3, deep within the woods of Velen, if you pay close attention, you can actually find what seems to be an exact replica of one of the massive sea creature skeletons we find on the toxic gas planet. And this likely means that at some point in the past, megafauna like whales rained from the sky on the continent and crashed into the oceans and lands along with a sea of rain from the oceans. It's a startling thrilling revelation, but one that makes more sense the more you dive into this mystery, and especially when you take into account all of the strange things we encounter in each of the games. And considering that on this toxic gas planet we can actually find a place of power as well, implying a strong pull of magic in the area, could it be that the aquatic life on this rock millennia ago was actually intelligent and beginning to wield forces of great power? Overall, for all the interesting things this planet reveals to us about The Witcher, it still leaves us with so many fascinating mysteries to solve, like what those sounds off in the distance and deep beneath the planet's crust are, whether or not we can find the previous inhabitants still alive in the oceans of the mainland games on the continent, and just what this planet used to be. I really do hope that we get more mysteries like this in the upcoming Witcher games, because for me, it's what makes them the most fun to play. I've mentioned it time and time again now in multiple videos I've made that Mass Effect 1 is not only the best Mass Effect game, but also one of my favorite sci-fi things of all time. And by far the biggest contributing factor to my love of where this franchise all began is actually the amazing level of world building and lore that this introduction so masterfully got the player base involved in. Because with any game with an engaging world, there's bound to be countless unanswered questions and mysteries that come along with that. The kind that simply let us wonder in awe at what the truth behind it all could be. And for Mass Effect 1 specifically, maybe no single planet or location is shrouded in a more intriguing mystery like this than the ancient ruins found on Ilos. As part of the finale of the game, Ilos itself isn't actually a place we get to explore all that long, but with the small time we do have, we uncover some of the coolest things in the whole series. First of all, to even get to this remote location, we have to discover the coordinates of the long-fabled and lost Mu Mass Effect relay, which allows faster-than-light travel to remote parts of the galaxy that have remained almost completely unexplored. When first docking on the planet, we are met with a grand view of a society covered in advanced technology and massive buildings, now all taken over by plant life and vegetation after years of being dormant. It's clear that some sort of Armageddon must have occurred, but as to what this is, it's hard to say. And as you battle your way through enemy forces on the same planet trying to discover the same secrets you are, the awe of it all only grows. For miles and miles, you drive through facilities housing sleep pods and top-secret research, along with devices and structures that bear no resemblance to any human or alien species you've seen in the universe up to this point. And again, in every area, the planet's life itself has taken over, with twisting vines and large swaths of plant life implying that no one has stepped foot on here in a long, long time. But just as this new setting starts to reach its peak levels of curiosity, we get another breakthrough and come into contact with a previously dormant and damaged virtual intelligence agent that controls much of the facilities, known as Vigil. When speaking with this orange hologram, we are told that Ilos is actually a long-lost research planet for the Protheans, a species that used to rule the galaxy thousands of years ago. You see, in the Mass Effect lore, for anyone who doesn't know, the big reveal of the first game is that the Reapers, who were originally thought to only be the capital ship of the Geth, are actually a race of highly intelligent machine monsters that purge the galaxy of all sufficiently intelligent organic life every 50,000 years. This process is due to their original Prime Directive, after being created by the Leviathan aliens millions of years ago to protect life at all costs. The Reapers determine that in order to do this, they must cull the budding life in the Milky Way periodically in order to make sure they do not become so advanced they kill themselves, leaving only primitive intelligences like apes that predated humanity alive to flourish in the next cycle, waiting to be murdered. So the Protheans that built this virtual intelligence on Ilos, Vigil, were completely destroyed in the previous cycle, and left Vigil on in hopes that he could warn a future civilization of the impending danger and of potential ways to stop it. It's a really cool reveal just by itself, and without a doubt is one of the most hype moments in the whole series, but for most players after this, they will just charge headfirst back to the Citadel for the final fight in one of the most epic endings to a game of all time. The thing is though, Ilos actually has a lot more mystery than just this. Because while the Protheans did make a home here and built many new great things, Ilos actually began hundreds of thousands of years before that, with a completely unexplained race of hyper-intelligent organisms known as the Insuanen. At the time, this grand civilization, like the Protheans and other races we meet in the current timeline of Mass Effect, had conquered most of the galaxy. With the help of the Mass Effect and Citadel technology that the Reapers always leave behind to try and trick civilizations them to their own doom. But the Insuanon were also said to be involved in a devastating war with another unknown species that we hear nothing about, which almost wiped them out completely. Ilos was one of the original planets that housed their capital cities, and it was said to have given birth to countless technological achievements that we can only dream of. But as in all cycles before it, the Insuanon were made completely extinct due to the Reapers, and so for countless cycles afterwards, new civilizations like the Protheans grew from their ashes, taking over now dormant facilities and learning from their ancestors, while building new things corresponding to their own civilization on top of these now dead cultures. Or in other words, in many ways, Ilos could be thought of as an eternal tomb, a place where now many great civilizations have come and gone, each being formed by the last, while also creating their new ideas on top as well. Beneath the ground are a millennia of history and technologies that have been forgotten to time, along with records of what these people were like, some of which were very similar to us, or some so different we wouldn't even recognize them. And it really all just adds to the mystery of this place, a planet that throughout history has served as either a central point of galactic politics and trade, all the way to being a forgotten and barren planet covered in dormant high technology buildings covered in moss. Maybe further study here will reveal some of the biggest questions still left unanswered in the Mass Effect series, or lead to even more fantastical things in the universe that we weren't even aware of before. But regardless, the planet and its origins, past and even present, are shrouded in so much mystery and intrigue that despite how short of a time we spend there, it's one of the places in the series I think back on most. The Elder Scrolls as a series seems to have a particularly potent knack at casting a spell on players, and by that I mean an ability to transport us to entirely new worlds where we feel completely immersed and enveloped. If you look online at game theories and long-form analysis, a lot of the best performing videos in these categories are from Elder Scrolls and Fallout, and a big reason for that are the mysterious locations full of questions that add so much to the worlds and their character, while also giving the fan base an endless amount of things to speculate on. But out of all of the places in Elder Scrolls which spawn crusades like this, maybe none are more captivating than Hactor and the story of the Deep Ones. Found in the Elder Scrolls IV Oblivion, at one point in your journey you can stumble upon a distraught and worried Argonian mother in a popular inn, who exclaims that her young and innocent daughter Dharma has gone missing. This Dharma herself is actually a person you met earlier in game, but it's only after your first introductions and upon returning to the same city later that the infamous Shadow over Hactor quest kicks into gear. Her mother gives you the route that they walked before she went missing and begs you to help her out. And if you start to trace through that same route through the nearby densely populated woodlands, you eventually stumble upon a completely remote and hidden town known as Hactor. Immediately as you enter the town, citizens start to either hide in their houses or simply ignore you. And if you question anyone about the disappearance of Dharma, you are met with nothing but short answers and concerned expressions. The more people you start to ask, the more commotion begins to stew as well, where if you are sneaking around the buildings, you can even hear multiple people gossiping and whispering, asking exactly what you're doing here. Something extremely wrong is obviously going on in this town, but you can't quite put your finger on it yet. But with the citizens acting so creepily, and lots of buildings in the town donning burnt infrastructure or strange symbolism, it's clear that we will need to investigate what's going on further. At one point, you even discover that a specific patron in town has been following you for some time, and that no matter where you go, will be just a couple of steps behind you, watching your every move like a hawk stalking its prey. But just when you think you've exhausted all options, you may stumble upon one specific resident named Jiv Harel. Immediately, if you question him about Dharma, he will shush you and expediently explain that he cannot talk here, but that the young girl is in grave danger. If you follow him to a more remote location, he will explain that 80 years ago, the citizens of Hactor discovered a grave evil. Miners in the massive cave networks beneath the town unearthed a discovery that would change them forever. Strange and disturbing beings, they nicknamed the Deep Ones, roamed and stalked in the dark, with creaks and groans that echoed off the claustrophobic walls and sent shivers down the spines of any who heard them. But even more horrifying, some of the unlucky miners began to experience unexplainable ailments and symptoms, turning into what were called the Brethren, feral human constructs with distorted faces and bodies that would hiss and aggressively attack others. In a panic, the town began to worship these now hidden Deep Ones and were told that in order to remain safe, they would need to make human sacrifices to their newly found gods. meaning deep below your very feet, Dharma could very well be sitting in a prison cell, chained to the walls of a dark and damp cave, waiting to be devoured by things we don't even understand. And well, it's one of the darkest stories in all of Elder Scrolls, but also opens up so many mysteries as to the history of Hackdirt and what the Deep Ones even are. For example, in the church in town, if you sneak inside at night and open up a book on the sermon table, you are met with a barrage of Daedric symbols and iconography, strongly implying that the Deep Ones themselves may be Daedric princes that are forcing people to kill for their own amusement, most likely Lord Dagon or Molag Bal. But also, considering the actual name, Deep Ones, maybe it could be a reference to the Dwemer, who are also called the Deep Elves in many lore tombs. More interestingly though, some in the Elder Scrolls community have begun to speculate that the Deep Ones could be the race of sentient fat toad people called the Slode, which are known to create massive slave networks and work with Daedric princes. This theory specifically holds a lot of weight as well, because if all of the Daedric symbols in the book are translated into a more readable language, the contents exactly match the text we can find from a Slode writer in the Elder Scrolls offshoot game Redguard. However, regardless of what actually is going on with the Deep Ones, this small and remote town in the middle of the forest is such an intriguing mystery. After all, what happened to the burnt down buildings we can see? How many people have been kidnapped and sacrificed here? What truly is going on with the brethren who have lost their minds deep underground? And what more do these people have to hide? Because the more you walk around Hackdirt and investigate its storied past, the more you realize there's so many more questions than there are answers. And even in a series with so many places like this, none quite leave the same lasting impression as a shadow that looms over this quaint and beautiful town in the middle of a dark forest. If you're looking for mysterious settings with complex and haunting lore or world building, there's maybe no better place to look than From Software games. Creators of Elden Ring, Bloodborne, Dark Souls, and Sekiro, their worlds are practically made to hide dark and foreboding secrets. But maybe no zone, in my opinion, leaves more of an impact than one of their very first, a location that gave birth to many more down the line in FromSoft's now storied lineage. And that place is Ash Lake from Dark Souls 1. Located beneath the Great Hollow, a foreboding and massive tree that you see throughout the game, Ash Lake is one of the most amazing discoveries you come across in the entire series. First of all, to get there, you must traverse a poisonous swamp near Blighttown, and around all of the edges are multiple invisible illusionary walls that, if bypassed, lead into the core of this grand tree. You see, many years ago, before the First Flame, which kicked off disparity in the world, forging life and death, light and dark, and the Lovecraftian creatures fans have grown to love, the world of Dark Souls was a much different place. It was an entirely barren and arid world comprised of nothing but depressing and boring grays. And in this era, known as the Age of the Ancients, the planet was covered in nothing but fog, gray and stinted rocks, and the great and everlasting dragons. But there was one more thing at this time that dotted the landscapes, and that was the Arch Trees. These massive structures were made of stone, half living and half mineral, with no consciousness, that simply existed in the eons of time. But after the First Flame and wars that followed, the trees started to take on even more of a life of their own. And for miles and miles all across the world, these hulking beasts stood tall and foreboding, as a symbol of not only power, but mystery. In Dark Souls 1, if you managed to make your way into the Great Hollow, one of these ancient arch trees, you were met with a maze-like labyrinth of never-ending vines, stumps, and horrors of the history inside. And if you manage to somehow make your way further and further down, you eventually are able to make it to a place even more bewildering than the tree itself, and finally come into contact with Ash Lake. Deep beneath this tree is an entire world unlike anything else you've seen in the game up to this point. An underground wasteland that stretches on for thousands of miles, with a thick and ominous set of fog and clouds that blanket the sky of this underground cavern, and millions of other arch trees sitting in slumber, stretching far across the underground cloudscape and into the world above. In every direction is nothing but sand and dark blue water, or branches that rival the beauty of the wonders of the world. It's an absolutely stunning place to find for the first time, and considering so many people can miss it since you have to go through multiple hidden doors and down an entire skyscraper-sized tree, it makes it all that more special. But the truly crazy part about Ash Lake is just how much we don't know about it too. For example, while we can see many other arch trees far off into the distance, the actual explorable area of the zone doesn't allow us to fully engage with any of them, instead keeping us restrained to our little beach area with a dragon to fight and 2 bonfires to discover. In a way, it makes you as the player feel small, insignificant even, because of all of the things you now know exist out there but are unable to reach. And even more crazy is the idea that these trees may not be leading to other places on the planet, but other universes and dimensions entirely. Some in the community, based on specific item entries and small hints, have even begun to speculate that Ash Lake may actually be more than just a hidden zone under the arch trees, but rather the center of the universe itself, where every tree you see is actually a new timeline, a new place, or an entirely new existence and dimension in itself. And the more you think about it, the crazier it gets, because even disregarding some of this wild speculation, how on earth did this zone come to be in the first place? Why are there massive beaches and what seems to be an entire ocean so deep underground? Why are there clouds and fogs in the sky of these caverns? And what sorts of secrets about the storied past of this world and the age of the ancients can we uncover by searching through Ash Lake? It really is just one of those zones where you simply stop for a second the first time you find it and sit in awe at what's in front of you. And the deeper you look into it, the more and more the implications become absolutely mind-blowing. And for me specifically, it's the perfect example of From Software lore and world building done right, where sometimes their storytelling methods and obscurity converge on the edge of being too obtuse and obfuscated just to seem cool. Ash Lake is a sort of genuinely exciting discovery that, because it's so hidden, really hits the mark when you finally find it. And even though we'll probably never find out all of the secrets of Ash Lake, it will forever live on in the minds and hearts of those who found it, like a bonfire whose light never dulls. I've always been a sucker for extremely obscure and artistic style games that tell a story through nothing more than secrets and intrigue. And in terms of titles like this, few do it better than the small indie project from Playdead, Inside. At the very start of the game, you find yourself as a young boy trapped in a forest, donning pale white skin and no face. But as if things couldn't get any weirder, you very quickly start to get hunted down by ominous men in the forest, who train their dogs under your scent and have them run you down. The real insanity only happens a little bit after this though, when you make your way to a nearby farm where, after sneaking into some of the buildings, you discover that an army of albinos, strange human-like creatures that look quite similar to you, are being marched through a conveyor belt of checks and testing. Something obviously sinister is going on in the remote parts of this forested region, and only by sneaking your way past all of the obstacles here do you finally start to uncover even more oddities. You find a submarine that takes you deep underwater, where you find poltergeist-esque monstrosities that hunt you down and scream. And most horrifying of all, by the very end of the game, you finally make your way into some of the main research bays in this massive facility spanning miles, where you unearth and become what is known as the Huddle or Blob, a hulking mass of human flesh and organs that rolls around in a ball as limbs from helpless individuals flail around like a piñata being struck by a bat. It's by far one of the most memorable endings to a video game I have ever played, and truly puts into context how brutal the experiments going on in this facility must be. But you see, that's just the thing. We don't ever actually get any definitive answers as to what's going on here. Based on what we do know though, we can harbor a guess that it's some sort of mind control facility, with lots of robots and a handful of scientists monitoring experiments. For example, as you run from left to right during the entire game, you stumble upon multiple head devices that have the power to control the albino husks entirely, allowing you to connect yourself to one node in order to get other helpless individuals to do your bidding. On top of that, during some of the underwater sections, we can find what are called mind tanks, cylindrical chambers with a single window looking to the outside world, with long and twisting wires and tubes that extend high into unexplorable parts of the facility. Could it be that these foreboding contraptions are used to create the albinos we see all across the game world? Or maybe even something more violent like the swimming girls? And on that note, what even are the albinos? Potentially they could be human beings that have been kidnapped and experimented on, or maybe even a new type of being entirely made from the flesh of many slaughtered pigs that we find. At one point, we even get quick glances of albinos that are being strapped deep underwater as their bodies float up, confined to wires that hold them in place, leaving us with a haunting scene of pure tragedy. Something truly horrific and remarkable is happening in this secret facility, and along with this, surely an unimaginable amount of pain and suffering. To what ends are the scientists here working towards? What is the point of all the experiments we find? And if it is all for mind control, then what's the end goal? Maybe it's a government conspiracy, or a cult of sorts hidden in the dense woodlands of rural America. Either way, considering how expansive and sophisticated this facility is, the benefactors behind it are obviously well funded and in search of some sort of answers. And really, the facility and inside is just another perfect example of how to do mystery in video games right, where not only do the questions themselves about the setting create a lot of intrigue, but also enable the ability for us to create a story in our own heads through nothing more than informed speculation. Sometimes not getting all of the answers is the best answer we could get, where everything we see is always shrouded in just enough wonder and awe. One of the best parts about having a YouTube channel, in my opinion, is getting the opportunity to talk about lesser known games or ideas that never got the love or recognition they deserved. And in terms of games like this, maybe one of the most memorable for me is Torment: Tides of Numenera. Because while I would never recommend anyone actually play this game, on account of the horrible combat, animations, and user interface, for those that can stomach these downsides, at the heart of the experience is a universe filled to the brim with unbelievable and fascinating places to discover, some of which are so unique and horrifying that it would be criminal not to include them in this video. However, out of all of these fascinating places, none reach the absolutely dizzying heights of the terror and fever dream that is the Bloom. Situated towards the end of the game in its final acts, the Bloom itself is actually an enormous and predatory living creature that lives between dimensions and space-time, with one of its most recognizable breeding grounds being beneath the capital city of Sagas Cliffs, where you start the game. You see, in the world of Torment: Tides of Numenera, we actually play on a planet known as the Ninth World, an Earth a billion years into the future that has seen the rise and fall of 9 great civilizations that have all mysteriously disappeared. And with each passing of a civilization, great artifacts and pieces of technology were left behind on the planet known as Numenera, meaning the current age of humanity, which is now stuck in a hybrid of medieval and retro sci-fi, launches massive archaeological digs to uncover technologies to help push us forward. It's a fascinating concept in its own right, and lends the narrative of the game to tackle countless cool and unique sci-fi ideas, with the Bloom itself being one of the most prominent. The creature of sorts, which was likely created by one of the long-lost hyper-advanced civilizations, is able to open up what are called maws in different places across multiple dimensions, and with these massive gaping holes filled with razor-sharp teeth, can suck in unsuspecting or helpless individuals into its inner core. Deep inside, an entire civilization of people within the Bloom creature have set up towns and trading posts, leading to lots of gang warfare and infighting, all watched over by one ruling elite member called the Memovira. Slave trade is rampant, killing is commonplace, and the Bloom itself is known to tempt those inside with the promise of riches and great fortune if they only search deep within the unknown caverns of the guts of this monster. But when they do, the Bloom will swallow them whole and pull them through its gooey and sticky flesh towards a hell that we could never even imagine. Everywhere you look is nothing but flesh and blood, with a constant smell of bile and indigestion. And no matter where you go, you can find hundreds of strange artifacts, or long-lost ships from our dimension, or even others that were swallowed by massive maws reaching through space and time to bring life to the Bloom. This also means by traversing the innards of this legendary beast, you can even find maws that will lead to new dimensions and places in time that only add to the elusive nature and powers of this monster that all these people call home. And really, it's without a doubt one of the most mysterious, unique, and downright awesome locations I've ever seen in a video game. Because even with all the out there and wacky ideas that are presented in Torment: Tides of Numenera, like cannibals who eat human flesh in order to retain memories of the past, or a police force made up of siphoned years of life from criminals or citizens into robotic constructs, nothing beats the pure adrenaline rush the Bloom gives you when you find it for the first time. It's a place defined by brutality and gore, where every step you take inside this living, breathing, thing is horrifying and unnerving, especially considering the Bloom is actively antagonistic to its guests with goals that we'll never truly know. And because of the creature's ability to cross dimensions so easily, it also almost acts like a bee spreading pollen, allowing adventurers across great distances in time or space and new technologies and peoples and cultures to cross paths that they never otherwise would have. And it really makes you wonder about the origins of this grand beast and the things that must lie deeper within its insides and unexplored passageways, which could lead to some of the greatest discoveries of those past civilizations that we've never seen. Or in other words, the Bloom is the perfect example of why mysterious places and games are so important, because they give rise to these fascinating questions about the world and its lore, which makes playing any game so much better. So for anyone that's ever been curious why I love this game, even though I absolutely hate playing it, it's because of amazing world building and lore like this found in some of the most mysterious and perplexing places out there.